In this first video debate with Albert, I want to point out to non-Catholics something that they may not understand. The Catholic priesthood does not go through the Levitical priesthood of the Old Testament. If you read in Hebrews 7:1-22, you will find that that priesthood ended when the Old Testament or the Old Covenant itself ended. That order or that line of priest ended. But there is a line of priest introduced in Genesis 14:17-20 that goes through Melchizedek. You know that he's without beginning and without end. And if you look at those verses, you will see that he blessed Abram after he had just finished or come back from a battle, and he blessed him and he offered him bread and wine. Of course, we know that from Matthew 26 that Jesus also offered bread and wine as well on the night before he was crucified. And when you go to Hebrews 7:1-22, you will see there that where that Leviticus priesthood ended, and Jesus is declared a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. So the Levitical priesthood is ended, and the Catholic Church now is not going through the Levitical priesthood, but through the priesthood that lasted forever, and that is the order of Melchizedek. If you read in Hebrews 5:5-6, you will see that the word order there means a regular arrangement or succession. And I have just shown you the Catechism of the Catholic Church and the numbers you can refer to there, showing how they themselves are saying that they go through the order of Melchizedek. So when you read those verses, it is clear that there was an order that will last forever. That order will not come through the Leviticus priesthood. It will come through Melchizedek, of which Jesus was declared that he would be a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. Now, the Catholic Church is not building on another foundation. They're building on the foundation that was left behind by Jesus Christ, with naturally Jesus Christ being our heavenly priest now, and the Papacy or the Pope being our earthly priest, who follows in succession and keeps that line of priests alive even until today. Let me talk now about the institution of the See of Peter, or the Papacy, and I'll be using Matthew 16 for this and a few other places. But first let me say this. The non-Catholics and the Sola Scriptura people want to say that there was no seat of Moses that existed in the Old Testament, and there's where eventually the seat of Peter is going to come from. But they say that it doesn't exist in the Old Testament. You can't find any references to it. Now, hopefully not all Protestants say that, but many of them do. But yet when you read in Exodus 18:13-16, you see where the people were coming before Moses to inquire of God and to judge between one another. And then if you'll go to Matthew 23:2-3, you will see where Jesus mentions the seat of Moses. Now, if that seat didn't exist, then are you telling me now that Jesus is making something up? I don't think that you would want to go that far. So apparently that seat of Moses did exist, and Jesus was well aware of it. And what was the responsibility of the people who sat on that seat? To interpret the law for God and to give spiritual guidance for the people of Israel. And you can see much of that in the Sermon on the Mountain in Matthew, starting in chapter 5, where on several occasions Jesus would say, "You have heard it said by those of old, but I say unto you." And what he is saying there is you have heard it taught by those of old. Again, those who gave spiritual guidance and interpreted the Torah for the people of Israel, who sat on the seat of Moses to do that. So to say that the seat of Moses doesn't exist, I believe is begging the question. And again, one must remember that when the Pope speaks ex cathedra from the chair of Peter, he does not have to be in Rome to do that, because the chair of Peter is an office. If the Pope was in New York City and for some reason needed to speak ex cathedra, he could do it there because he carries that office with him. So he doesn't have to fly back to Rome and sit in some special chair. The chair of Peter is an office, just like the seat of Moses was an office in the Old Testament. The people went to the person on the seat of Moses for spiritual guidance and instructions in the law. The same way the church seeks spiritual guidance from the Pope today, from the chair of Peter, on matters pertaining to morals and to doctrines. So this isn't, like I said, this isn't something where the Pope has to all of a sudden speak ex cathedra and has to fly back to Rome to do it. Wherever he goes, he carries that office with him. If for some reason, and that this has happened several times throughout history, where the Pope may be in captivity or because of persecution have to be away from Rome, he could speak from wherever he was, and it was the responsibility of the church to speak, to follow that, because wherever he went, he carried that office with him. He spoke from the see of Peter, or from the chair of Peter, and that Old Testament see of Moses is an antitype, so to speak, or a type of what is going to happen now in the New Testament when the see of Moses ends. And that's another mistake these sola scriptura people make, I believe. They, for some reason, can't realize that old covenant ended. So the seat of Moses didn't exist anymore. It ended. And they're apparently looking again through the Levitical priesthood, when the Catholic Church doesn't use the Levitical priesthood. It goes to the priesthood of Melchizedek, as I've explained earlier. Another thing that just doesn't make sense to me at all is this. There's different datings of the beginning of the book of Genesis and the Torah. Some go back to 1500, some 1450 or whatever. But take whatever day you want, some 1500 years or 1450 years. There was someone sitting in a position to give instructions and guidance to God's people, whether it be through the Torah or judging one another for whatever reason, for some 1450 years. Does it make logical sense for anyone, for God to all of a sudden say, now you're on your own, you don't have any guidance anymore? To me, it just doesn't make logical sense that God would leave this institute of the church behind without some guidance being there. Another way to look at that, it would be that if the Pope, whoever that Pope was, had to speak from the chair of Peter in Rome, it would be the same thing as Moses having to go back to Mount Sinai where the law was given in order to give guidance or spiritual guidance. And I think you can see now what I mean by that. And Moses didn't have to pack his bags and go back to Mount Sinai every time someone asked him a question, simply because that's where the law was given. Wherever Moses went, that office went with him. The same way with the Pope. Wherever the Pope goes, that office goes with him. Because the see of Peter is an office, and I see now I'm going to have to go into the next video to explain this now, but the see of Peter was an office that was instituted by Christ. And I will continue in the next video with the office instituted by Christ, that is the papacy, which the Catholic Church follows today according to the order of Melchizedek priesthood, and thus are very consistent even today with what the scripture teaches. Thank you, and I'll be looking forward to making this next video hopefully today. Thank you.